Hi, it's Kim Jamieson-Hirst of Chatterbox Quilts, and today I want to talk about what to do when you have blocks that you want to use in a project, but they're not the same size. So I have these orphan blocks here, and I thought I would just take them and put them together and make a little table runner. But as you can see, I've got a bit of an issue with this one here. These two blocks are the same size, but this one is not. So what do I do, because I need it to be the same size before I can put it together with the other two orphan blocks? Well, what you need to do is you need to add coping strips, okay? So coping strips are extra pieces of fabric that you will put around a block to make it the size that you want. In this case, the same size as these two blocks. So how do you figure out your width that you're going to cut your coping strips, okay? And your length too, of course. Length isn't too bad because it's going to be the length of my block, right? That's for the side ones. And then once I put those on, the length would be, whatever the block is now with the side coping strips on, okay? So that's not an issue, but what about the width, okay? So how do you do that? In this case, we're dealing with blocks that are, these two are 9.5 inches, okay? 9.5 inches square. This particular block is 8.5 inches square. So you can see the difference here. If you put it in the center, you can see that it is smaller, right? So what you do, and I'm going to talk generically here, is you would take your largest block, okay? So in our case, it's 9.5 inches, but it could be any size, right? You take your largest block and then you take the actual block you're working with, in this particular case, this one, and its size is 8.5 inches. So I want the 8.5 inches to grow up and be 9.5 inches. So you're going to take the difference between the two. 9.5 minus 8.5 is 1. I hate doing quilt math, but I can figure this one out. So the difference between the blocks is 1. But because we're adding coping strips on all four sides, you can say 2 sides here, 2 sides here, we need to divide that number, 1, by 2, okay, for the 2 sides. So that gives us a 1/2 inch, right? But then we have those things called seam allowances, right? So you always know you have to add a 1/2 inch for your seam allowances. So a 1/2 inch plus a 1/2 inch gives us 1 inch, okay? So what that means is I'm going to cut coping strips for all four sides that are 1 inch in width, okay? As I said, the length on the 2 sides here, we're going to start with the sides. We're going to say these are the sides, and that's the top and bottom. You're going to have 8.5 inches in length here by 1 inch for both of those coping strips. So that's the first thing you need to do, is stitch those on, and then you can calculate the length, when those coping strips are on. So I'm going to put those on, and then we will calculate the length of the strips for the top and the bottom. I've added the coping strips on either side, and now my block is 9.5 inches in this direction, but it's still 8.5 here. Now, I know because I already measured it, but I'm just going to measure it again and make sure it's looking about, yes, 9.5 inches. Okay, I don't trust my own quilt math, so I like to measure before I'm cutting strips. All right, so I need to add strips at the top that are 9.5. I have some cut that are a little bit longer because I wasn't exactly sure of my quilt math, so I'll cut those down to 9.5 and stitch them on. And then this block should be the same size as the other ones. Now that I've added the coping strips, this block is the same size as these, and now I can go forward and make my table runner project. Now, if you're wondering how to make this block, which is called a potato chip block, don't worry, I got you covered. Check out this video that has all the information that you need. And for more helpful quilting information, be sure to go to my website at www.chatterboxquilts.com.